Okay, I'm Alice Green. I was actually born in Greenville, South Carolina, but I've lived in Albany since the 60s.
Earl Thorpe, I was born in Jacksonville, Florida, came up in '56, and I've been here ever since. Travel all over in music.
My name is Patricia Beadle. I was born in Toronto, Canada, actually, but I moved to this area in 1953.
I'm Sue Clark. I was born in Orange, Texas, a long time ago. And I came to this area in 1968.
Well, I first met Earl, I think, through Trinity Institution,
That's correct.
and in the 60s, and this was just prior to the Civil Rights Movement.
That's correct.
And so a lot of activity was going on at Trinity. And then once the Civil Rights Movement came into existence, there were a whole bunch of people who came to Trinity to get involved in
Right.
what was going on in the city of Albany. And I know Earl eventually was part of the Brothers, which he's going to talk about, I'm sure,
Right.
because they were a part of the groups that were operating out of
Trinity.
the Trinity Institution, which was the center of the Civil Rights Movement, because they were able to get funding
Right.
for the Great Society War on Poverty program. So it allowed community organizations to develop and grow. And that's how we sort of started working on different issues around employment discrimination, around voting rights stuff, and housing, another
Correct.
important area,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. Alvin Kirsch, the slum landlord.
The slum landlord. That was right. That was the big
That was
thing.
the big issue.
That was the big thing that pulled a lot of people, not only in the South End and Arbor Hill, but beyond that, to get involved in civil rights issues. Because once that story came out that was written by Bill Kennedy,
Yeah.
as a series, and it showed all these pictures of the housing conditions that people were living in the South End. And so people were outraged when they saw this, and so they decided to get involved. And housing was a major
main issue,
was
yeah.
a major
Yeah. Well, Trinity, as Alice spoke, Trinity was an umbrella agency for SNCAP, South End Neighborhood Cooperation. We got funded. It was a single action program because the city administration wasn't interested in that money because it was called anti-poverty money at that time.
Right.
And they said no, they didn't like it. So
and control.
and control, yeah, yeah. So we formed the group, SNCAP, and we were able to get funded with Mike Nottolil and Dick Collins. I was chairman of the program, and we hired George Bunch as a coordinator. And from that group came Olivia Rory, Ann Freeland, Leon Van Dyke, to name a few. And after we formed that group, a little later, we saw a need for a black male group, and we formed the Brothers. And since the Brothers wasn't in the census tract, we had to move out of Trinity. So we moved up on Pearl Street, and the rest is history.
Well, I remember Olivia Rory particularly. She was a real dynamo. And also, I certainly was aware of the brothers' activities. I was a member of Albany Friends Meeting, and some of the friends were more involved than I had small children at the time, and I was kind of otherwise focused, but a lot of the members of the meeting were very supportive and tried to help the brothers and other such groups. And also, I remember Alice at the time of some of those Martin Luther King gatherings at the convention center in Albany, and they would have a march over to the Martin Luther King statue in Washington Park, and she would unfurl some banners that had different kinds of messages on it. I wish please, Alice, tell us what those messages were.
Well, the one that I remember, of course, is the one that got me carried away, and I was working on prison conditions, and so trying to get the administration to not build any more prisons. So the one at the convention center I had was it was a banner that said "No more prisons." Simple as that. And they had warned me before not to disturb anybody. I didn't disturb anybody. I just opened my banner, and then I think about 6 giant state troopers came and carried me out.
Carried away.
And so, and as I was being taken out, I said, "Well, as long as they're taking me out, I might as well give them my message." So I was shouting, "No more prisons," and they carried me out, and they said, "We'll take you anywhere you want to go." At the end of the hallway, said, "We'll take you anywhere you want to go," and they had this state trooper car, and I said, "If you think I'm getting in the state trooper car with you, you're crazy." So they said, "Okay, then we'll arrest you." I said, "Well, that's better."
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one. Those demonstrations every Martin Luther King Day were, we prepared to do all kinds of things.
Yeah,
So
you
it's,
knew he was going to get arrested.
yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about prison time and being in the Albany jail. And either of you have that experience of being arrested?
Well, I got arrested a lot. They didn't keep us overnight. We were able to bail ourselves out. We never did any time, But it was just the idea of being arrested. You knew you were going to be arrested. And I had a couple of pieces of property. We could bail them out, put up the property and get out the same night. So that's the way that worked.
Quakers get arrested a lot.
Some of them do. Just recently, Francis Crowe, who lived to be 100 and just died this past year, developed the American Friends Service Committee office in the basement of her house over in Northampton, Massachusetts. And a couple of years ago, when she was 98 or so, she was in a wheelchair and she was involved in some demonstration or other. And she was arrested, and they asked her, "How many times have you been arrested, Frances?" And she said, "Not enough."
I was active I was majored in sociology at the University of Texas, and I got interested in civil rights and issues early on, and when I was happy to move from Texas to up here because I felt that things would be much more settled and good as far as working with and understanding the issues in civil rights. I have from the time we lived for a time in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I got interested in low-income housing issues. And so when I moved to Troy, I got interested in fair housing issues. And I was on a committee in Troy to work on this for a number of years. So I focused on these issues of fair housing. We had, I was appointed by Troy as a member of a committee that worked on that for a good while. I'm almost too old now to remember easily the specifics of some of the things we did, but that was the main interest.
Well, the yearly meeting,
Of the Quakers also
Yeah.
was concerned with these things. So,
yeah, and she used to have meetings at her house with people from around the state from our yearly meeting of Quakers who would come once a month or something and stay overnight at Sue's house and have meetings about these racial issues of what was happening around the state. So
That's interesting about the housing, though, because that was a major issue in the '60s here in Albany.
Yes, it was.
As Earl was mentioning, we finally got an opportunity to focus attention on the terrible housing conditions that people had to live in. And the other thing is, today, that's a major issue still. So it's not one that we've solved very well, but everybody's working on it because they know the importance of having people live in good housing and live in areas where they also can have good schooling and everything. So that's an important issue. I'm happy to hear that you worked on that issue.
yes. And I was, as I say, worked on that for, well, to get the laws changed as well as working with people who needed housing and building houses, building the construction of housing that was affordable
Affordable housing, yeah.
for
Yeah, that's the important.
everybody.
Affordable.
yeah,
Because you build a lot of houses, but if they're not affordable
Not
to people who
affordable,
need
still-
them,
Still can't get it.
it's still, yeah.
So but that seems long ago and far away at this point, I'm afraid, from
Yeah, but
Trouble
you-
is that
you
the
had
issue
to
is
have-
still here.
1960s, yeah.
But you worked on the foundation piece. I mean, that's
Yeah.
you're probably. I know Troy's been involved in housing for a while,
Yes, yeah.
and so with people like you who worked on those issues, you know, you were able to help the rest of us.
Yeah.
And as I said, the problem is still here, but you know we have managed to do a little bit to
Right,
make
right.
housing available to people. So that's great.
And I don't really know whether there's still the same, any kind of committee in Troy dedicated just to this issue anymore. I
Yeah,
don't
I
keep
know there
track
was
of it,
one. I'm not
Yeah.
sure either, but
but it is something that I felt was the most
Needed,
important thing
yeah.
I could contribute to when I moved up here.
But I think it's really good.
We had, as I say, in Pittsburgh, had fostered finding, not only finding housing for people, but working to get good, better education and things of that sort.
Yeah.
So.
Well, like with housing, racism, all those issues have been with us, and they're still here.
Still here today.
And racism, I think it's important to talk about it in a different kind of way, because we focus during the civil rights movement, we focus on just making sure that people got the rights that they were guaranteed in the Constitution of the United States. However, the country never really intended to make us equal, and so they've used laws and programs in a different kind of way. They now call them colorblind.
Yeah.
You know, like things like the drug laws, for instance. They say, oh well, everything is colorblind now. We don't discriminate against people
Right.
in employment,
Right.
you know, but that's just not true. And so I think what we have to do as a society and as a community is to understand how structural racism works, that it's embedded in all of our institutions,
Yes, sir.
and it's much more subtle in a way, but it's there. And if you have policies and programs that promote inequality, that's racism. And so we're trying in policing to get the departments to understand that issue very well, and to and I'm also concerned about police officers not knowing the civil rights history, because in order for them to start figuring out how to treat people equally, they have to know the history.
That's right.
They got to know how this country has actually treated people of color, particularly African Americans, and why, you know, we as a people aren't angry for no reason. You know, there's something there, and you got to understand why I'm angry, and what your the role that you play in promoting that anger through stereotypes and other forms of institutional racism. So it's a
Still
different.
exists.
It still exists, but we got to understand what it really is, which we have not been able to do.
Yeah, well, now with this 400 years of first bringing the slaves to the U.S., there seems to be more emphasis on trying to think of the whole history of racism in this country, which I think hopefully will be positive in getting people with white privilege to recognize all the positive things that have happened to them because of this,
Yeah.
because we put down people of color. So I'm hoping that the things that are going on now will add to the understanding about that the racism that started then is still with us. It may be in a different form, but it's still here, and we need to have people recognize that that they do have white privilege and that other people are put down because of it.
Right, and that's our major focus of our program. And a few days ago, I went to Portugal because I wanted to understand that whole sweep of enslavement, you know.
Oh,
and in
yes.
Portugal is where the slave trade actually started. So, and in Portugal, they're doing the same thing that we're doing here. They're trying to ignore it and hide it. But I was lucky. I was with some Africans who are now trying to make sure that Portugal understands the role that it played in enslavement and what it did to us as a people and actually globally, how it's affected the whole world. You know, so yeah, I think that it's so important to understand that history, and that's what we're pushing the police department to do.
Yeah. I have a prime example. My daughter, principal of a school in Schenectady, she was over a lot of white teachers. She tried to adapt them to teach our kids. They said, well, we're here for 8 hours. If they get it, they get it. If they don't, they don't. So it still exists.
Oh yeah, sure.
It still exists.
Absolutely. Well, that's part of trying to understand the difference between diversity and inclusion, because we've been pretty sold on the idea that in this day and age that we have to have diversity. I mean, I have been invited to more things than I can think of because I was black.
Yeah.
But that
They
doesn't
wanted you
mean
to be there.
Yeah, that doesn't mean you know can include me in the society as an equal partner.
Right.
And that's been the biggest thing to overcome. You know, is to understand, that is a form of exploitation as well, and that we have to learn how to accept people in all their different ways, and cultures as equal people, and we haven't gotten there yet.
No, it's going to take a while. thing.
Would you tell, Alice and Earl, Pat knows about it, but would you tell what Quakers are trying to do with this 1 week day camp? So this is kids.
Yeah, I wasn't as much involved with it this year as we started this a number of years ago. So how long has it been that we've had it?
Well, we originally had it for about 11 years, I think, and then there have been 2 or 3 years when we haven't had it, and a new committee with some younger people on it have gotten together and put in a very ambitious Peace Week this year, very well organized, much different from the one we kind of threw together. But it seems to have been quite successful, and there were a number of children from the RISE program of the church, something I can't think of the name of it, where they have after-school programs and so on for children who come here from other countries. And so they included some of those in the Peace Camp as well, so that it added to the diversity and the experience of all the children together.
It was more international than it's ever been.
Yes, right.
That's good.
Rattle off some of the countries that the kids come from.
Since I wasn't there, I
Is
don't
it
know all of them, but a
any
lot of them.
Syria, Somalia?
Yeah, it's in
Africa,
African
Ghana?
countries, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
And
the
Central
Rise-
America.
The RISE, okay. My granddaughter does work with them
Oh,
during the school year. So, yeah, there are people from every country you can think of, just about,
Yeah.
which
yeah, that's true.
is great.
So that added to the experience of our children who are white, who haven't had that kind of exposure before, so that was very good.
Could I ask?
Oh, yeah, go, just go with it.
You said you came from Texas, right?
Yeah.
And it sounded like you were saying that it was important to get out of Texas to do to do civil rights work.
Well,
Or-
I did do some of the same kind of things
Was it
when we
welcome
lived
there?
there.
Was it welcome?
What?
Were you welcome doing that? Doing that?
No.
I didn't
No,
think
that's
so.
what I gathered.
Yeah.
I was just,
Yeah. But as I say, I had the idea that it would certainly not be as awful that it was still in the southern and southwestern states.
yeah.
But that was,
But you
and
saw a
of
need
course
for
I'd
it.
already had the experience of living in Pittsburgh way back in the,
Oh, okay. So you knew that it was different.
and
Very
understanding.
much so.
Yeah, because that's what happened with my father. I mean, he was he lived in South Carolina, and he thought that by leaving the South, or Jim Crow South, that when he came north, racism would be behind him.
Yeah.
And what he quickly learned was that it was up here too. It might have been a little bit different, but it was still up here.
Exist.
Yeah, still exists, which is which is the issue we were talking about before. Is that
Right, right.
it's still here, and it might look a little bit differently, or people
Cover
see it
up.
different. Yeah, it's still around, and we can't forget that.
No,
But
no,
fortunately, too often we do.
right. Well, I was in Jacksonville, and I was an only child, and my dad worked out. He did piecework, and I got a scholarship to Morris Brown in Atlanta.
Oh.
But I couldn't wait to leave because the racism. Emmett Till, the year before that, he had just died. And I was a rebel-riser anyway. They used to come to see my father to send him, sell him something in the afternoon. I have made the food because my mother was a cosmetologist. She was in the petition, yeah. So I would come and prepare the food he's eating, and all of a sudden somebody comes and want to sell him a vacuum cleaner. We only got 3 bedrooms. I'm doing the vacuuming. I don't have 4 hands. So I said, you don't need a vacuum. He said, well, Earl, you got to watch your mouth with these guys. I said, watch your mouth in my house? I don't think so. So Daddy was kind of happy when I left. He said, my only child's going to get killed down here. All he could visualize is Emmett Till.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
those things from well, Emmett Till was 54, but
Yeah, this
but
was,
there are things within our experience, or at least our parents' experience, that it was told to us and got passed down.
right.
And it's amazing how they influence what you do and how you perceive things. Because the Emmett Till thing, obviously, just about every a black person I know,
Right.
In
2
our
years.
age group, would probably mention that as the thing that was most frightening.
Yeah.
And you remembered it, and you were frightened. I was, it took me a long time before I would go south, because the Emmett Till picture and what had happened to him, and also the 3 civil rights workers and all of that,
Yeah.
scared me to death.
Right.
And I would not go anywhere. You couldn't move me. Because so these things live with you, and they
Yeah.
affect your life and how
Yeah.
you see life and everything.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important for people to understand our history.
Yeah.